The Pope and Young Club wants to welcome you as we rally together to ensure our bow hunting opportunities for today and tomorrow. You've come to the podcast that believes in preserving, protecting, and promoting the passion for bow hunting. Join us as we strive to be the voice of today's bow hunter. This is the Pope and Young Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pope and Young Podcast. Jason Roundsville here, joined as always by my co-host Dylan Ray. And we have back with us today, we have renowned bow hunter Dennis Dunn. Dennis, welcome back.
Pleasure to be back, Jason.
You didn't get enough of us last time?
Well, no, I guess I never get enough of Pope and Young in any way.
Well, we appreciate it. I mean, we can do weeks and weeks of stories of just nothing but you, because you've been doing this. How many years have you been bow hunting?
I've been bow hunting, let me think, 72 years.
72 years. So I would imagine you've got enough stories to fill a year's worth of podcasts. So we're happy to have you back on because we want to hear about some of them. And then for those of you who don't know, this was all done with now was it a longbow?
No, all types of bows, not crossbows.
Okay.
I don't consider a crossbow an archery weapon, but I've never used any sights. So all my animals have been taken with purely instinctive shooting. So some of them are taken with a compound, although not in the last 16 years. Some with a longbow, some with a recurve. I hung up my compound in the fall of 2006 for good and never have gone back to it, never will. I just get more pleasure out of shooting an arrow with a traditional bow so I can see it in flight. These modern compounds, especially in poor light in the evening, you can't even see your arrow in flight.
No, that's a problem that I've had for a lot. I mean, 30 years ago I could, because the arc of the thing, you can just follow it. But yeah, lately with these bows as fast and flat as they are, I can't see them at all.
It's not surprising somebody invented the Luminoc. So at least when people take a shot at last legal shooting light at an animal, they've got some chance of seeing whether or not it may have hit the animal or not, and or finding the arrow afterwards to examine it for sign to see if they did get a hit.
Yeah, and they are great for that. I sometimes people ask me a lot of questions about different stuff. Sometimes I don't necessarily have an opinion, or I don't necessarily have the experience that I feel necessary to give an official opinion. But I'll tell you what, when it comes to Luminox, absolutely 100%. I'd support them, promote them. And I mean, if you're hunting with me, unless you're in Idaho where you can't have them, they are almost required. I use them even for target practice because I just can't see where I'm hitting otherwise.
Jason, let me share something with you and your viewers on that. I absolutely support Luminox, but I've never used them. And around the time I would have started using them is when I hung up my compound forever and went back to my roots in traditional archery. And now I won't consider taking a shot at an animal that's not at least 30 yards or closer to me. Yeah. And at those close distances, Luminox are not so critical. I mean, you can have a pretty good idea of being able to see your arrow at 30 yards, but not out there at 60 or 80 if in your last half hour or so of legal shooting light. Yeah, and I took the position in the Pope and Young Club meetings years ago. In fact, a lot of people raised their eyebrows over it because when I took my world record Grizzly Bear in the spring of 2004, I took it with a compound, shot it from 8 yards away, and it lived maybe 45 seconds before it gave up the ghost. But that was the Pope and Young world record for 10 years. And about I shot it in the spring of 2004. And along about 2009, I think it might have been 2011, Rod Tobias from Pennsylvania shot a bigger bear that scored more than mine did. but he could not enter it in the Pope and Young records because it had been taken with a lighted knock.
Huh.
So I was in the position, because I believed so strongly that lighted knocks increased the archer's chance of recovery of his animal. I got up and argued on behalf of the club accepting lighted knocks for animals taken with them for entry, even though I knew that that would immediately dethrone my world record and Rod Tobias's bear would then become the number one.
Wow. Yeah, most people wouldn't have done that.
Had you ever heard that story?
I had not heard that story. That's a good one, though. It's, and we have been often, critiqued for being, in some cases, kind of the equipment police. And, especially for me, I just don't have great eyesight. So I'm glad that we allow them, because I just, once again, can't see without those things.
Well, I have supported them ever since they came out, and I didn't feel it was right for Rod Tobias to be denied the world record just because he had shot that bear with a lighted knock. His bear was accepted by Boone and Crockett long before Pope and Young accepted it.
Yeah, they're a little more lenient on a lot of the rules than we are. So
well, they don't get involved in equipment the way we do. You're right.
Yeah. So it's
because for them, as long as the animal is taken legally under the canons of fair chase, and within a legal season, they don't care what the weapon is. It could be a spear.
Yeah, it could be a Ford Bronco.
Well, I guess so. I mean, that's what you call a picked up trophy.
Yeah. So and you know what? The guys over there, Justin and everybody over there, man, they're good about it too, because they know when they see me, I'm gonna ask the question, hey, if I hit this, because Pope and Young, we're a hunting organization. I said, if I hit it with my car, will you take it? And they're like, yeah, we will. We will, because you've asked us that 30 times. So, you got to have a little fun with those guys when you can. And they're good sports. They're really good.
Are.
So, now that's the bear. What other world records have you been involved with?
That's the only Pope and Young world record.
Okay.
I've had 3 world records, all of which are broken now. I mean, records are made to be broken. Yeah. But I have held briefly, anyway, 3 other world records with SCI, Safari Club International.
Okay.
I was tied for the world record in Canada lynx, and I took that animal in the fall of 2006 with a recurve. And I held for 1 year only the SCI South Pacific world record for free-ranging red stags, red deer.
Huh.
I shot that beautiful animal in the spring of 2012. And for 1 year, it was the South Pacific archery world record for red stag. The other one was I held for a year or two the world record for Columbia whitetail deer. You can only hunt them down in southwestern Oregon, and I shot a nice 4x4 down there that for a year or two was the world record.
That's my neck of the woods.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, those are probably just maybe an hour from where I grew up. It's kind of
the Umpqua River Basin down there. So you hunt around Roseburg, east or west of Roseburg, for those animals, and they're beautiful little animals. Some they occasionally produce some very big bucks, and I saw one during the time I hunted him. I never got a shot at him, but I saw a couple that would have been Boone and Crockett quality, although I don't think Boone and Crockett accepts Columbia whitetails as a separate species.
Yeah, that's
subspecies.
Yeah, that's exciting to be able to have, because when you're talking to folks, a lot of people, even a Columbia blacktail is one of the last on their list. And, those are lists that most people don't even include a Columbia whitetail on because
Right.
there's just so few opportunities. So pretty neat that you got the experience to do that.
Well, when Oregon started offering a lottery draw for them after it had been illegal to hunt them for 30 years, roughly, somebody tipped me off to the fact that there were 50 archery tags available. And I figured it'd be such a demand from bow hunters in Oregon to hunt them that it would be tough to get drawn for one. So I had accumulated 7 bonus points trying to get drawn for the prime archery mule deer area in eastern Oregon. And I squandered all 7 of those bonus points in applying for my first Columbia whitetail tag. Well, I got drawn and then found out that only 30 applicants ever even put in or something like that.
Right. Yeah. That's.
And then I didn't kill one that year. I ended up shooting it on the last day of the hunt that first year. I spent a week down there shooting a little forked horn because I at least wanted to claim the species. Turned out that forked horn was a Columbia blacktail. And, unless you see their tails, and it was shot in the last light in the evening, the antler structure is not going to tell you whether a forked horn is a Columbia blacktail or a whitetail.
Yeah.
So I went back the next year, got drawn again, and that's when I shot the 4x4.
Nice. Good for you. Now, did you know somebody there, or did you hook up with an outfitter for that?
I did. I knew somebody there that lived in that area and worked with him. He found a landowner that was willing to allow me to hunt on his property, and so it worked out real well.
Very nice. Very good. That's it's always neat when it works out that way. It doesn't always work, but it's neat when it does. And so what on your list, what's the next thing up on your list that you're looking forward to?
Well, as you may recall from our interview in December, our podcast there, my bugaboo has been trying to upgrade my Alaskan barren ground caribou.
Right.
There are 5 bow hunters that have put all 29 Pope and Young species in the Pope and Young records. I know all of them, and they all use compounds and yardage sight pins for aiming, and 4 of the 5 use trigger releases. Only Edwin DeYoung of those 5 who put all 29 in the Pope and Young records uses 3 fingers on the string. The others just trigger releases, which is what most bow hunters use, of course, in this day and age. But nobody has ever put all 29 species in the Pope and Young records with purely instinctive shooting. So for some years, that's been my goal. And I was counting up earlier today the number of Alaskan barren ground caribou hunts I've been on, and it's at least 11. I just got back from spending another month up there hunting both August and September in 2 different parts of Alaska, trying to get that trophy quality bull because they're very hard to come by. The Alaskan herds of caribou have dropped off dramatically in recent years. They're stable in a few parts of the state, and a couple of herds are growing slowly. But boy, I'll tell you, it's really, really tough to get them because they're called barren ground for a reason. Most of them live north of the tree line where there's no cover at all. So if you're a stick bow hunter like me, how do you get to within 20, 25 yards or even 30 of an old bull that got old by not being dumb, by being extremely good at evading predators with no cover? And most of that land is flat as a pool table. The north slope of the Brooks Range, for example, is where a lot of those hunts take place. And it's a very, very difficult challenge for an archer, especially a traditional archer.
Yeah, we just talked to Frank Noska not too long ago, and he said that when he's hunting, caribou is one of the species that when he's hunting those, he'll actually stretch out how far he practices his shooting just for that same reason, because there's not a lot of cover. You're just, there's only so much distance you can close, and that was with the compounds, especially if you're shooting trad equipment, the range goes down and definitely a challenge. Well, you like a challenge. You wouldn't do what you do if you didn't like the challenge.
Well, that's what it's been all about for me all my life. I love to set a bar for myself that I think is not going to be easy to reach. But when you finally clear the bar, you have a sense of accomplishment that is pretty sweet, and then you build on your successes. One stepping stone to the next, and every time you achieve a new goal that you set for yourself, why you begin to that further builds your confidence, and pretty soon, eventually, you, as I have done in my life, come to the realization that there's probably nothing I can't accomplish if I simply work hard enough and I'm willing to make the sacrifices and never give up on the goal. This one I'm talking about now, I'd love to be able to claim the first all Pope and Young barebow super slam. Nobody's ever done it. When I took that bison in 2020, where I spent a total of 71 days in a double bull blind on the Kaibab Plateau of northern Arizona, that was the next to the last species that I needed to upgrade. And I ended up, the good Lord dropped that bull in my lap 3 days before my tag was to expire. But I had spent an average of 12 hours a day in an upright chair for 71 days trying to fill that tag.
No, thank you.
Once I got that bull out of the way, that's my bison upgrade, then I had left this Alaskan bearing ground caribou. So I'm making plans. I've already booked a hunt. I'm going to be hunting the porcupine herd in northeastern Alaska next September with a good friend. And we've got a transporter all lined up to fly us into a lake in an area that's been pretty productive in the last few years. So the nice thing about that area on the south slope of the Brooks Range is that there are some trees around. There is vegetation, and the topography is more broken up. So there'll be opportunities for stalks and ambushes there that were possible where I was hunting this year.
Yeah, that's good. Well, that's, when you talk about dedication, Dylan, here's what you're looking at. Okay. He's done this 11 times and he's already booked his trip next year. That's dedication. When you talk about
insane,
Dennis, was it 71 days in a ground blind?
I had 2 breaks during that time because I knew that at my age, I'd never get drawn for a governor's bison tag. I went to auction. See, I'm 82 now, and I was 80 then. So I knew that if I was going to upgrade that bison, I would have to buy a governor's tag. And I did. It came with a 365-day season, which was nice. And I hunted the first 5 days of the season, starting August 15th of 99. Then I had to hurry back home to Idaho to repack to go to Alaska for one of those caribou hunts. And then, but I always knew I'd come back to Arizona in 2020. And that's when I gave it my everything. I started hunting the 23rd of May, hunted for 36 days, took an 11-day break, went back and hunted for another 30 days, I guess it was. And as I said, the good Lord delivered my bull to me, a real old pumpkin head, 3 days before that tag was about to expire. But it was a labor of love, and it was it was one of those things where you have to be so incredibly self-disciplined, or you give up and throw in the towel. I only saw bison on 7 days out of 71.
Oh my gosh!
See, that's, and we were just talking a bit ago. I had an antelope hunt. It was 16 hours a day in a ground blind. After 3 days, I was done. I'm like, I had planned on hunting. It was a 9-day season, and I was going to give it the full 9. And I'll tell you what, Dennis, after day 3 of being in there that much, I'm just like, you know what? There's elk to hunt. I've got a couple of deer tags. I'm like,
yeah,
I'm just, I'm going to head out. But, wow, 70 some days.
Well, I have to explain something. I was working with an Arizona outfitter named Russ Jacoby, whom I cannot say enough good things about. He and his whole family have worked with the hunters that get drawn for Arizona bison tags for the last 20 years. He provided me with a base camp and transportation to within 3/4 of a mile of the blind I was hunting from every day. He wouldn't get me any closer because those bison get hunted 350 days a year. So most of their visits out of the park to the salt blocks that Russ maintains are nocturnal. They only make a mistake occasionally, usually during periods of the dark of the moon, because they don't like to travel through the forest outside the park in pitch black, or when it's very, very hot. And Russ Jacoby told me that the average number of days the hunters he's worked with over the last 20 years have to spend in a blind before they see their first bison is 14 days. And he said most people can't hack it. So when I arrived in camp to hunt with him, I said, I'm here for the long term. Given my choice of weapon, I am going to, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. If I'm here a month or 2 months or till the season ends, I'm going to do what it takes to fill that tag. But I said, I know I could not maintain myself dark to dark 15 hours a day for all those days. So I said, I think I could probably hack 12 hours a day. So tell me, do you think I should give up the first 3 hours of daylight or the last 3? His advice when we started the hunt was to give up the first 3. But after 36 days, I think after 33 days, he said, we got to switch this around. It may change our luck. So I started then giving up the last 3 hours of daylight. And that's when my fortunes began to change, because in the last half of that hunt, I had 3 different bulls near the end of their life, what they call pumpkin heads, that are really, 9, 10, 11-year-olds come to visit me. I was only able to get a shot off at one. Well, that's not quite true. People can read the story. It's been published in 8 or 9 different magazines. Pope and Young magazine carried a story on it too, so people can go back and read that. But there were 3 bulls that I had a chance at. Didn't get a shot at the first one. The second one, I forgot that I needed to cant my recurve bow a little bit to the left in order to avoid any potential problem with the roof of the tent. And when I finally released that arrow at a huge bull, it came in the middle of the day when you would least expect it, in a herd of about 30 animals. I had a momentary glimpse of his rib cage between 2 other animals, and I released that arrow in a hurry, but the top limb of my bow struck the roof of the tent. And the arrow sailed out the window of my blind and struck him high in the back with the force of a wiffle ball, because the tent had absorbed most of the energy of the bow. Mm. And of course, the arrow went in maybe an inch, and he went running off and was totally unscathed by the incident. But it wasn't until 3 days before the tag was about to become worthless that I got my third chance at a big old bull. And that's when I give my maker all the credit, because I know it could not have happened without him, and without his help. And when he finally came in about 4:45 in the evening, as I was getting ready to pack up and go out from that blind, he approached the salt block directly facing me, and he chowed down on it for 15 minutes, never changing his footing. So I had my recurve lower limb sitting on the dirt floor of my tent, my blind, my fingers on the string, the broadhead sticking out the window, ready to shoot at a moment's notice. But I knew that as soon as he lifted a front hoof, I would have to draw and release that arrow immediately, or he'd be going straight away from me. And sure enough, that's exactly the way it came down. And that arrow struck him in just the right spot. It busted through a rib. It transfixed both lungs, severed the pulmonary artery in between the 2 lungs, and he hit the ground in 10 seconds. He traveled 18 yards is all he went. He was dead in 30 seconds.
Wow. Yeah, that's and they're big. You can't tell me
that I didn't have some huge providential intervention on my behalf there.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're cutting it that close. That's last 3 days. That all of a sudden you start tightening up a little bit.
I didn't cut it that close. The good Lord did.
Yeah. So no, that's a great story. I just, man, that's a long, long time. And then the hardest part for me would have probably been when you took that 11-day break between your periods, because I don't know what it is. And I don't know if you had cameras out or not, but one of the places that I get to hunt elk, I'll go in there and I'll hunt, when I can hunt, which is not 70 some days. And then when I'm not there, I'm getting sometimes I'll get pictures, and it hurts my feelings when I'm not in my blind or tree stand and I've got these bulls, and I walked in there one time and I've got a ground blind and a tree stand not too far apart from each other, and literally right smack between them, a bull had just torn up this little pine tree. And it's so much to the point that I took a picture. I'm like, man, is this something you're excited over, that you're in the elk, or is this just tick you off knowing that he was right here and I wasn't.
Yeah.
So I think that would have been the worst for me, is when you took that break knowing that, man, today could be the day that they came in and you're not there.
Well, so I also knew that if I was gone 11 days, there might be only one day there at most when I would have seen any bison anyway.
Yeah. Now, were you hunting the same blind the entire time?
No, Russ switched me around. I think I hunted out of a total of 5 different blinds during those 71 days. Yeah.
And that's another thing. I have a hard time if several years ago, this place I hunt, I was the only one there, so I could pick from a number of very, very good blinds. And I think like 3 or 4 different times I just picked wrong. I'd go to Honeymoon and they'd come, we'd get them on the camera going by Dutch Rock. And then I'd hunt the Pope and Young blind and they'd go to Honeymoon. And then I'd go to Honeymoon and they'd go to Homestead. And literally it was this cat and mouse where they just out maneuvered me every day. And so then
it's enough to drive a man to drink, isn't it?
It is. And so then I'm just like, okay, well, I know eventually they're going to come by Dutch Rock. And so, then I'll go sit in that for 8 days in a row or whatever, I happen to have at the time. And then you just wonder, you're like, am I doing this right? Because if they're somewhere else, they're not going to come by here. But I just get stubborn to the point that I don't want them to come by when I'm not there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Last year, Jay, I was hunting down in Oklahoma at Liberty Ranch, one of our outfitters, and I'd hunted for like 5 days, and I sat in the same blind for the first 4.5 sits, and first 4 days and morning sit, and didn't see a lot of action, and so I finally just said, "Dude, put me somewhere else." And he's like, "I'm telling you, this is where I think he's gonna show up," and I'm like, "No, dude, put me somewhere else." And so I moved to a new spot. I did see one of the funnest sits I've ever had. Saw tons of deer, a lot of rut activities, really cool set. But while I was sitting there, he sent me a picture of the giant that we were chasing
at your
20 yards in front of the blind that I was hunting. And I'm like, gosh, dang it. And I texted him back and I just said, this is why you trust your outfitter.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. In fact, that's a great bit of advice that I like to give to your viewing audience, because having hunted with so many outfitters in so many states and territories during my life, or provinces of Canada, generally speaking, your outfitter and your guide know so much more about their territory and about the habits of their game that you're hunting in their territory that you're foolish not to take their advice. They're not always right, but they have a better chance of being right than you do. So be very slow to second guess your guide, because when they're telling you that you think you should do something, they probably have one or more good reasons for it.
I'm a huge proponent of just learning, like altogether learning from guides. I'll drive them insane, because like if I roll into like an elk camp, like I'm asking that outfitter as soon as I get out of the truck, like ask him different questions.
Sure.
How have the elk been acting this time of year? Where are they at height wise? Are they, what elevation are they hanging out this time of year? And I drive them insane, but I view that as my biggest learning opportunity of the year. I mean, you can learn so much from those guys. So all week long, I'm just trying to pick their brains and hear from them and gather as much information as I can. And, then I utilize that. And then, next year I'm like, well, I remember that outfitter saying blah, 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 and use that information. And so I'm a huge proponent of learning everything you can from guides.
For sure. And of course, experience is the best teacher. You learn so much from every hunt you go on. You learn most of all from your mistakes. And, but Jason, getting back to a question you asked me earlier, you asked me what hunts do I have planned? What's on the top of my bucket list right now? Could we go back to that one?
Absolutely.
Obviously, the caribou I mentioned in Alaska is at the top of my bucket list 10 times over. But
so we'll go to the top.
I have two other hunts. I'm sorry.
So we'll go. Caribou is the top 10 spots. So what's in your top 20? Well, what else?
Let me tell you, everybody has to recognize, of course, that I'm in a race with Father Time. At my age, you never know which hunt's going to be your last one, right?
Well, none of us know that, Dennis. That's any and all.
Oh, that's true. But I'm a whole lot closer to having had my last hunt probably than you are, either one of you guys. But you just never know what's going to happen. It can be a health issue that suddenly knocks you out of the arena for good, or it could be something like almost happened to me this last month, where I got charged by a bull muskox from 4 yards away and lived to tell about it. But I have 2 hunts planned for next year besides the caribou hunt.
Hey, Dennis, that's because you think you're closer because you haven't seen the way I drive.
Okay.
So anyway, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
As long as you don't drink and drive.
Never.
only dooskies.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there's a good friend of mine in Moses Lake named Joe Russo, who is a traditional archer, and he and I have shared bison hunt together in northern BC a few years back, where he took a really nice 6-year-old bull, but it just barely missed Pope and Young. And I never drew an arrow on that hunt because I only saw young bulls. But at any rate, Joe and I are going to hunt black bear with an outfitter in central British Columbia this coming early May. He hunted there last year, and spot and stalk only. You can't bait them up there. But he was making stalks on black bears every single day, multiple stalks on some days. So we're going to spend a week hunting black bear together. I haven't hunted black bear in quite a while. I've taken one spot and stalk, and I've shot 2 over bait from a tree stand. I baited up my own black bear the first time I ever killed a black bear. It was about 8 miles from downtown Seattle, the way the crow flies, out on the Pine Lake Plateau between Lake Sammamish and Lake Washington. And that was an experience. Of course, it's in my book. That story is called The Marshmallow Bear, for those who want to check it out. But I love hunting bears. There's something about bears. It's so enigmatic, so mysterious. They have a 6th or 7th sense that goes beyond just their senses of smell and senses of hearing. Their sight's not all that good, but you bow hunters out there listening to this podcast, just be aware that even though they're supposed to not have very good sight, that only applies to their ability to identify a silhouette. They have outstanding sight when it comes to movement. But you can get away with a lot if you're close, if they can't smell you and can't hear you, if you don't move. But somehow, when you spot and stalk black bear, they will often become aware of your presence. And rather than just bolt, they'll just somehow sidle away and feed away from you and leave you wondering why you never got a chance to draw on them. But they knew what they were doing, and they don't even let you know they're onto you sometimes. I got carried away on a tangent there, but the other hunt I have planned for next year, you've already done a podcast interview with Dr. Warren Strickland.
Oh, yes.
He's one of my favorite people, and he's one of the greatest bow hunters in North America today, without a doubt. He and I we hunted Couse whitetail in Mexico once, many years ago. Haven't hunted together since, but we have planned a mule deer hunt for desert mule deer in Mexico next November.
Nice. That's outstanding. Now, is that next year or coming up next month?
No, I meant 23. Yeah, next.
Okay,
November.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, so some of us are still trying to round out our 22s. So
I understand.
That's the difference between the goods and the greats, Jay. We're still looking at the last 2 weeks of 2023. They're already booking their hunts for 2024, 25.
Yeah. I'm still trying to. I'm still hoping I get to sneak in somewhere here in the next couple months. And Dennis is like planning out. He knows where he's going. He's probably got his hotel rooms and his flights taken care of.
No, not true. And I haven't booked any hunts for 25. Or 24 either. I'm taking it 1 year at a time and putting that caribou first, but I figured that I could afford to make those other 2 hunts next year. If I'm alive enough to hunt caribou next September, I will have been able to hunt black bear in May, and maybe I'll still be alive enough to hunt mule deer in November.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm ready to see, and you have my number. So when you get that caribou, you send me that text, because that's a picture I'm looking forward to seeing. Because that is the 29th one that you need
to have all of them in the Pope and Young records. That's right, Bearbo.
That's pretty cool. So yeah, I'll be waiting for that.
Of course, that's
That's
the title of my book too. And that book of mine, which came out in '08, that went on to win 6 national literary awards. It's simply called Barebow.
yeah, and it's
An
a
Archer's Fair
wonderful book.
Chase. And the subtitle is An Archer's Fair Chase Taking of North America's Big Game 29.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal book. If folks haven't seen it, you definitely need to check that out. And I know, Dennis, you promote it, but it's going to the illustrators, I believe, right?
That's right. I promote it in order to help Dallin Lamson feed his 6 children, primarily because 6 years ago, I gave all the remaining copies of the unsold copies of the book to the 2 artists. Hayden Lamson did the 30 color oil paintings, 29 of which introduced the 29 species chapters of a portrait of that species in its natural habitat. But Dallin, the son, contributed 38 black and white fine line graphite pencil drawings, and he has no other job. He paints 6 days a week. It's a Mormon family, and he is trying to raise 6 kids on his earnings as an artist, if you can believe that.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to make much of a living painting unless it's like
anybody
houses.
who wants to
Finger paints.
order a copy
Jason's
of that
go
book,
with finger paints.
they should go to barebows.com, the book's website. You put an S on the title, Barebow with an S, barebows.com. They can order the book right there, and they'll end up sending their credit card number or check to Dallin Lamson.
Nice. Now, any other books in the works?
Not at the moment, but you know what I'm thinking of doing? A lot of people over the last few years, more and more, it seems like all the time, are urging me to republish that book as an audio book while I'm still alive and still have a good speaking voice. And I think once I get this caribou under my belt, that will become my priority project, I think.
Nice. That would be fun.
I did republish it back in 2012. I republished it as a series of ebooks that you can download from Amazon. I broke it up into 7 different volumes. Volume 1 is the Barebow Deer book. Volume 2 is the Barebow Elk book. Then the Bear book, Sheep book, Caribou book, Moose book. And then the 7th volume is the catch-all book for the 5 species that don't fit into a family, namely the stories of mine in the chapters on muskox, bison, mountain goat, cougar or mountain lion, and pronghorn antelope. But all of those are downloadable through Amazon, and the elk book has 3 stories in it, not in the print book. That's the only one of those ebooks. I think they're downloadable from Amazon to your Kindle for $4.99 each. But there's one extra story for each of the 3 elk species in that ebook that's not in the print book.
Okay. Now, if you have to pick, so we're just going to go just the ones that are in that book. What's your favorite animal or your favorite trophy that is in the book?
Well, I've been asked that question a lot of times in different forms. Probably the one that means the most to me is my stone sheep, because I married a Canadian. I lived in British Columbia for almost 11 years, and I was able to hunt stone sheep for the price of a $50 resident sheep tag.
There you go.
And I'm sure there's no way to prove it, but I suspect I may well be the only American who can claim to have taken a stone ram with a bow and arrow without a guide or a hunting buddy. I did it on a solo do-it-yourself backpack hunt.
Wow.
And so that means an awful lot to me. That was an unbelievable dream come true. And when I came off the mountain at the end of a week, never having seen another human being the whole week I was on that mountain, I think my pack weighed about 140 pounds. Wow. The story gets more interesting, though, for the reader who gets a copy of my book, because when I presented that ram for the compulsory inspection by the BC wildlife authorities, they confiscated it from me, told me it wasn't legal. Well, they took me to court, charged me with shooting an illegal ram. I was eventually cleared of the charge, but you could make a movie out of that whole deal. I ended up in the BC Supreme Court twice. The judge who first when the Crown Counsel prosecuted me at the Superior Court level up in northern BC, that judge was later removed from the bench for alcoholism, which I guess didn't surprise me, because the first day of that sheep trial, we recessed for lunch. When she came back an hour later, she totally forgot she had started a sheep trial that morning, and called upon the same Crown counsel prosecuting me to present his next case, which involved a drunken Indian beating up his girlfriend over the weekend. And then 3 or 4 more like that came along. And by 4:30 in the afternoon, with 2 expert witnesses, one a sheep biologist sitting there in the courtroom ready to testify on my behalf, the Crown counsel reminded Her Honor that she had started a sheep trial that morning. This is just the beginning of what turned out to be an unbelievable legal saga that lasted over, it lasted over.
I say we make a movie.
11 years.
I know. Yeah.
Well, I finally got the sheep back, but you won't believe what I went through to get it back.
Wow. And so were they saying it was not the right age class, or what was the?
Well, don't go into the weeds with me there, because it's very complex. To be legal, a stone ram has to either be 7 years of age, or it has to have one horn tip when viewed from the side, quote unquote, in the regulation pamphlet. One horn tip when viewed from the side must rise above the forehead nose bridge line. But don't take me any further than that, because it becomes very complex. Anybody who wants can read the story of that trial and the subsequent hearings and trials that I went through. And it makes a fascinating read once you get into it.
Yeah,
that's a salesman right there. Tells you enough to get you going. Then he says, "It's in my book. Go check it out."
Yeah, just a tidbit. Yeah, nobody needs that hassle.
If you want another example of why my grand slam of the 4 sheep has probably caused me more grief in acquiring those 4 head and shoulder mounts for my living room wall than maybe any other sheep hunter in the country, you should read the story on the desert bighorn, because a chucker hunter found my dead ram while we were still searching for it, cut off the head, neck, and horns, stole them. I ended up having to put an ad in 3 Nevada newspapers in order to get my ram back, but I finally got it back, and I finally got it accepted, not only plugged by by Nevada Fish and Game, but accepted by the Pope and Young Records Committee. But what I went through to get my stone ram back and my desert ram back, you cannot believe.
That's so you, especially on the stone, the plus of a $50 tag was eventually taken up with lawyer fees.
Yeah. Actually, I didn't even hire a lawyer until I'd been into this for about 2.5 years. I told you, I ended up in the BC Supreme Court twice. First time by myself, the second time with a lawyer. But anyway, I finally got it back 11 years later, and the final story in that book, the final story in that chapter, the Stone Sheep chapter, explains how I got it back, which was quite amazing.
Yeah, well, I guess when you've been hunting as long as you have, and as many places as you've been, you're bound to have some stories like that. However hassling they were along the way, at least you've got them now. So
that's right.
Have you had any that didn't go your way, like something that was stolen that you didn't find?
No, I can't say that, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, I had a couple of mule deer stolen by a taxidermist. So
I remember you telling me that once. Yeah.
It's not a desert sheep, but at the time for me, it might as well have been. I
believe it.
And to this day, it's funny because somebody says, "Well, just go shoot a bigger one." It's like, okay, I'll go shoot a bigger one, but it still doesn't replace that one. I still don't.
Yeah. And as I recall from your story, that was a pretty big mule deer.
Yeah, it was for me. So, which is when Dylan and I are talking about big deer, anything over a fork and horn is considered basically a big deer,
and sometimes a fork and horn.
Yeah, that's true.
You were asking me what animal meant the most to me of the ones I've taken.
Yeah.
Well, right after that stone sheep, I guess it would have to be my world record grizzly bear. I mean, how do you top that? I shot him from 8 yards away. On the book's website, you can click on videos and watch the footage taken by my camp cook with my camcorder, and that was obviously an incredible thrill. Then the bison hunt we talked about earlier in this podcast, that had to be one of the great highlights. Those are probably the three most special animals for me. The fourth one would be a 380 Rocky Mountain elk, a 380 class elk that I shot in Arizona on public land in 2015 with my recurve and a wooden arrow.
Yeah. What's the easiest hunt that you've ever had? What's something where you're just like, man, I was walking to the blind and I was there for 3 minutes and here he is. Anything like that?
Oh, like when I was 10 years old, a squirrel. I've shot blue grouse out of a tree. I shot a chucker off the ground who thought he was well hidden under a sagebrush bush in Utah once. Those just kind of dropped in my lap without any effort.
Yeah, that's Dylan and I talk about that because it's everybody who shoots big stuff says in order to shoot the big stuff, you have to pass the little stuff, which is hard.
I don't believe that. I don't agree with that.
Yeah, then we had Chuck Adams on, who the first deer he saw on his hunt for blacktails that year was the world record.
A world stinking record.
Yeah, so I'm like, dude, I could shoot that if it was a world record. I just, the problem is, by the time I see the world record, I'm done because I tagged out on a 3-point.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a really important point to make, and I tell people the only way you ever shoot a record book animal, a true trophy quality animal, is to pass up everything less.
Yeah, and even then sometimes it doesn't do it because
That's right.
Last 2 antelope hunts I've been on, I've quite literally killed the biggest antelope I either saw in the unit or caught on camera for the area I was hunting. And neither of those are probably going to make it. So,
well, to make the point again, in my case with regard to caribou, there have been a couple of caribou, Alaskan bearing ground caribou I could have killed in the last decade, but they wouldn't have made Pope and Young's minimum of 325. I can think of 2 that I had dead to rights that probably scored right around 300.
Yeah.
And that makes it for some other species of caribou, but not for Alaskan bearing ground.
Yeah. Yeah, which is still, that's a great caribou. It's just not quite booked.
That's right.
So, yeah, Dylan, I think I'd be happy with a 300-inch caribou. How about you?
Well, you know me, Jay.
Yeah.
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
My dad called me and he gives me a hard time and he says, son, when are you going to shoot a big deer? And I said, well, when a big deer steps out before a little deer does, I guess. Because I just like shooting stuff.
That's good.
No, I say this quite often. I'm really good and really picky until about the end of November. I've passed up a lot of really good bucks at pretty much every year, but when it gets into November and I've been hunting for 60 plus days, pretty much if it's got horns I'm going to shoot it. And last year I FaceTimed my dad as I was walking up. I said, Dad, I just shot a buck, I wanted to show you. And his first words were, dude, you sent me videos of deer bigger than that all year. And I'm like, I know, but it wasn't, I was still holding out for a bigger one then.
Yeah.
Didn't catch me on a bad day.
Yeah. It's my whole thing is I just, if I think, I just want to see if I could get this and then draw. I don't know what it is, but as soon as I draw on something, I feel compelled to let an arrow go. I've got an antelope and a mule deer, both pretty small, that would verify that for you.
There's just no shame in my game, man. I mean, if a deer comes in and it gets me fired up, I'm going to shoot it. And I'm not going to apologize to anybody for it.
Yeah, it just looks at you sideways.
There are a few trophy animals that I could have taken in my life that I passed up because I had a more burning desire within me to shoot that animal with a camera instead. I'll never forget the wolverine. I spent 3 full minutes, less than 30 yards from a male wolverine that was chowing down on a caribou kill. And I filmed him for over 3 minutes because I was so thrilled at the chance to get a wolverine on film at close range. Most people who hunt the North Country never even see one in their lifetime. And if they do, we're usually running away at 400 yards, but I had a chance to get this footage of this wolverine my guide and I had seen him 3 days in a row and had begun to pattern him. And I finally figured out a plan that I thought would allow me to get close and maybe kill him. But when I got there in position, and he came in to feed on the carcass just where I thought he would, in the way I thought he would, he had no idea I was there. And I picked up the camera first. I had the bow lying on the ground next to me with an arrow on the string, ready to shoot, and I had a Wolverine tag in my pocket burning a hole. But I was so thrilled at the chance to film him that I filmed for 5 or 10 seconds too long. And when I picked up that camera, or rather put it down and picked up the bow, it was a compound bow then, unfortunately. Had it been a stick bow, I would have killed that Wolverine. But, with a compound, the wheels turn over and you would lurch into your anchor. Well, as I was drawing, he hopped off the carcass, not because of me or saw any motion. Had that been the case, he would have dived into an alder creek bottom that was just 10 yards below him down the hillside. Instead, he hopped off the carcass and started loping across the open tundra to another alder creek bottom about 80 yards away. He just felt he had been exposed long enough and had enough to eat on that at that meal, so that he better get cover again. And if I'd only stopped filming 5 or 10 seconds sooner, I would have had a stationary shot at that Wolverine, and what a trophy that would have been.
Yeah, you don't hear about a lot of those getting taken, especially.
I only know one archer that's taken a Wolverine with a bow, and he killed 2 of them 2 days back to back. Both of them were a mating pair feeding on a caribou carcass of a bull that he had killed a few days earlier up in the Northwest Territories. And I'm speaking of my good friend Randy Lillenquist.
Yeah, that's they're pretty rare. The only one that I've been around, and I wasn't even around it, is I was waiting at camp for some buddies, and they show up because they pulled my trailer up to Canada, and one of the fenders was all bent in. And I'm like, guys, what the heck happened? And they're like, dude, we hit a Wolverine. I'm like, come on, what happened? And they're like, no, we really hit a Wolverine. So
no, really?
To this day, I mean, it's been like 10 or 12 years, and to this day, both of them swear they hit a Wolverine with my trailer. So that's
did you know that a grizzly bear will never contest a dead animal, a carcass, any food source with a Wolverine, because a Wolverine can kill a grizzly?
Yeah, I know I don't know about killing them, but I know they're definitely don't like each other.
Well, I had an Indian guide on a grizzly hunt up in the Yukon explained to me years ago why it is that a grizzly won't tangle with a Wolverine, because the Wolverine, they're so quick, they can attach themselves like lightning to the underside of the chest of the grizzly, and they hang on with all four sets of claws while they bury their teeth under the neck and the jugular of the grizzly. And whereas the bear may have enormous strength with his arms out to the sides, where he can knock your head off and send it 30 yards through the air like a soccer ball, you get his paw. He doesn't have that strength in close next to his chest, and he can't get that Wolverine off him before he's bled to death.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to be a Wolverine that had to figure that out. You wouldn't want to be the one that had to try it.
Right.
So, well, I'll tell you what, Dennis, we appreciate you coming in and spending some more time with us. Obviously, you've got stories that we just love to hear about. And, we're part of a large, a large crowd that's rooting you for that caribou. We want to see all 29. So we're going to continue to be cheerleaders for you. And you know what? As soon as that one hits the ground, you text us a picture and we'll set up and we're going to want to hear about that.
Sure enough. Very good enough, Jason. Well, thanks for your cheerleading. Believe me, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, I cannot wait to see you in Reno. That's coming up. We're working hard on conventions. So,
have the dates been set?
Yes, it's April, 12 through 15.
Yep.
In Reno at the Nugget. And registration, our goal was to have registration open in the month of October. And I believe that we're only a few days away from registration being open. So keep an eye on your email. We're going to let everybody know as soon as that hits.
Okay, good enough. I'll plan to be there, God willing. And tell the powers that be there on the staff, and that if they want me to give another seminar, an illustrated seminar, I'll be happy to do it.
That sounds good. And you know what? If you do it, we'll even have some AV stuff that works this time.
That'd be great. I'd appreciate it. I think you owe me that.
I do. I definitely do. And it has been noted, and we are taking steps to address it.
They said, Dylan, we're getting a new AV guy for next year. I said, great, because I never claimed to have known this stuff ever.
Yeah. Yeah. You try to do it, and especially how it was last time in the middle of COVID, Virginia went sideways, and then we went to Reno, and it turned out great. But going into Reno, we were pretty scared. And, once again, on the backside, everything went well, but you just don't know, 2 weeks out. And, we're trying to run with the skeleton crew.
Yeah, you were short-staffed, I remember.
Yeah, plus Tim was brand new. And
like a week. He was like a week in.
Yeah, he was a week in, and somebody else went home sick. So we were pretty tight. But this time you have my assurance that either that AV works, or I will personally roll ahead down the hallway.
All right. Well, if you haven't already picked your bandwidth speakers for Friday and Saturday, throw my name in the hat.
Okay, will do. Yeah, Heather handles that, so we'll touch base with her and let you know, Dennis. We really appreciate all your support along the way.
Well, thank you so much for this wonderful second podcast.
Okay. Yep. Really enjoyed talking with you as always.
And good luck to you this hunting season. It's
not
over yet, is it?
For me,
Dylan, you got to get that big November whitetail buck.
I sure got to try. Yeah.
All right. Good luck, you guys.
My West Coast seasons are just about over, but as long as we don't tell anybody, I'm going to try to sneak up to Alberta and shoot a few birds while nobody's looking. So
good luck on that one.
Thanks so much. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.